Right, Eugene, thank you very much for inviting us to your fantastic pad in Monaco. For people who don't maybe understand what's involved in MotoGP and Superbikes, can you tell us a bit about the bikes and a bit about the sort of speeds that you do? You've said the length of the race is about 35 minutes, but tell us some of the high level stats about the sport.
So the bikes, in Superbike nowadays we've got 240 brake horsepower. In MotoGP it's up to 280 brake horsepower. From 0 to 100 kilometers an hour, it's I think faster than a Formula 1 car now.
Yeah. Wow.
And the power to weight ratio is crazy. And in the past you had circuits. The circuits haven't changed. That's the thing that the people seem to forget in 20 years. And the bikes back then had almost half the horsepower. So there used to be a straight line where people would relax and tuck in. It was all about aerodynamics.
Yeah.
Nowadays, when we shift through from first to fourth gear, it's constantly, it's like you're doing a pull-up because you're having to pull your body weight forward to stop the bike wheeling. If you sit backwards, then that's lap time lost because the bike's going to wheelie. You're going to have to roll off the gas, and that's going to lose your lap time.
Wow.
So nowadays in a straight line, the straights are much shorter now. It's only when you get into fifth and sixth gear that you can actually relax. It's a very short time. I know there's some tracks like Donington Park. I think we use full power for like 0.1 of a second.
Yeah.
So that means with your electronics engineer, you're always trying to dial out the power because we can't actually use it. With four wheels, there isn't much weight transfer, so those guys can spin the wheels and get the power to the ground. With two wheels, unfortunately, there's only a certain amount of power you can use. With weight transfer, the bike's going to want to transfer backwards, so that means the bike wants to wheelie and you have to roll off the gas. So either you ask your electronics engineer to reduce the gas, or you actually get off your ass and move your body weight forward to stop the bike wheeling. And if you want to go fast, that's what you have to do. So that's why we have to be more fit nowadays, because a lazy rider is going to pay for it.
Yeah. Where in terms of, you know, kind of fitness of your contemporaries on the grid, where do you think you sit in all of that? Do you see it being quite equal, or are there guys that are definitely fit or definitely less fit?
Sometimes I look on Strava at some of my rivals, and I do think, oh god, that guy's running faster than me, or he's putting out more watts on the bicycle. But then I remind myself that during the season that doesn't count for much, because I see the guy with cold sores, and I see him maybe having a mid-season lull, and that reminds me of myself in the past. So I always remind myself that it's about the results. That's what matters. And the work that I do in the off season, the winter, that's the most important thing. So I don't really chase King of the Mountains and on Strava and all the rest. I work on my base fitness and making sure that the hard work is done in the winter, so that sticks by me during the racing season.
Yeah. And one thing that's always amazed me about working with racing drivers and motorcyclists is like the psychology of what you guys have to go through. You know, I've seen heart rate data on some of the F1 drivers I used to work with, where their heart rate would be 160 beats a minute when they're sat on the start line. How do you deal with all that nervous energy and the hormones and all that kind of stuff? You know, do you still feel that as much as you ever have in races?
I'm one of the fortunate few that on the grid my heart rate doesn't go up, and that's why in the first lap of a race I can go into the first corner and just be straight up to speed. At the end of the first lap, sometimes I've had a 1 second lead because I'm able to just get straight to my pace whenever the lights go out, and that's because it seems that adrenaline doesn't affect my heart rate like some other guys. So I'm fortunate in that respect. I know there is some guys that it really just sends them skew with, and that's something they have to battle with. For me, it's all about routine. I have the same set routine leading up to a race, and even on the grid, I'm always laughing and joking with my wife Pippa or with the mechanics, because the hard work's done for me. Then it may look like I'm not serious, but I've already thought through my plan, some of it that morning, and some may have already been on a Thursday before a race weekend, to understand what I have to do in a race. So if you're thinking about it on the grid by that stage, it's probably too late.
Yeah. So you've got it all sort of, you're on the treadmill before you get there, so you know what's going to happen and roll through.
Yeah.
What about, you mentioned a little bit about the fact that obviously crashes are part and parcel of the racing job, and you've definitely had your fair share, especially recently with breaking both your wrists and things like that. How is this, you know, there's a physical rehab that goes with getting back on a bike, but what about the mental side of things? Yeah, because for an example, I remember crashing my road bike, you know, push bike, that is, not motorbike, a few times, and then sometimes there's a little bit of nervousness about getting back on and riding the same roads and that kind of thing. How do you cope with getting back up to speed?
Every crash is different. I had a crash a couple of years ago where my brakes failed, but I knew the reason why they did. I'd got hooked on with another rider and it pulled my brake lines out. It was just a freak incident. I got on the bike the next morning and my first flying lap was straight on pace. I had no problem with it, whereas unfortunately again this year my brakes failed and that haunted me for a little bit. You're going down straight line and you can feel this is going awfully fast. Whereas the day before you might have thought, yeah, this is 250 kilometers an hour, this is perfectly normal, but some incidents, it does play in your mind, and you're going on the straight and you're just checking that the brakes are there.
Yeah.
So it's all a case of getting back in the horse, and it is tough. It's something that you can't really quantify because every crash is different. Some crashes you think aren't going to affect you, and some crashes you think will, and you don't understand the nature of it. It's all the brain is sometimes you can be your own worst enemy, and once you get over that again, then we get back on the bike. Well, they always say that once you can't get over that, then that's the time to retire. Thankfully, I'm 33 and still keen to get back on the bike.
Yeah, we know you're into your road cycling quite a bit, and quite a lot of the other, like you said, the motor racing drivers and cyclists who do that. Who do you tend to train with when you're here?
A lot of the car drivers, because I can't keep up with the cyclists. That's probably the best reason. I enjoy riding with Brendan Hartley. Brendan's got the same sort of mentality as me. We go out on our bikes and enjoy riding. It's always a bit of an adventure ride. A 2-hour ride can become 4, and I enjoy that aspect of cycling. I try to structure it a little bit, but sometimes whenever you ride your bike, it's just good to go and ride your bike for fun. And the best thing about being down here, they know that the sun's out, so you can always find somewhere to top up your water bottle. Yeah. So I'll always, doesn't matter if I go out for, somebody says it's going to be an hour and a half ride, I always go with 2 water bottles because you never know what can happen.
Yeah. So how hard do you train when you're not on the bike then? Because I guess some of your training would be testing the bike, very sort of specific stuff, but how much other training do you do?
Most of my training is in the winter period. Yeah. And to be honest, during the season I try to take things back a notch, because that's something that as a motorcycle racer we have to realise that there's so much more going on for us on the mental side with what's going on with adrenaline and cortisol and all the rest. During the season you have to just kind of take over. So I spend the winter months really just getting a great base level of fitness. So the bicycle is the best thing for that. I enjoy running during the season, but in the off season you can get 15 to 20 hour weeks on the bicycle, and that is something that just sticks by you during the year. This year, whenever I got injured in May, for example, I was more than 3 months off the bicycle, but I was able to kind of keep things on a good level just from running, and that was because of the hard work that I did in the winter. And unfortunately, that's all part of our game. We get injured quite often, so you have to do the groundwork to make sure that if something like that happens, that your fitness is going to stick by you.
Do you, for that reason, do you complement any of the aerobic training you do with strength work? Do you do any gym work and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I do, but honestly, less and less as the years go on, because the bike is becoming more and more cramped. We're becoming like a crab on the bike. We're all knees and elbows. Yeah. The smaller the position, the more aero, and the more you can move your body back and forwards. So flexibility is becoming more and more important. Yeah. 6-7 years ago, I was strong as an ox in the gym, but on the bike I felt so weak. So it's something that I wish somebody had told me years ago, was to understand that whenever you get strong, keep flexibility with it, because I was just focusing on numbers and repetitions in the gym. Yeah. And once I got on the bike, I realised that that didn't count for much.
Yeah, it's quite a fine balance, isn't it? I guess because most of your training has to be doing something which is not specifically related to the actual sport that matters. I remember I know that you trained with him, but I remember working with Mark Webber many years ago, and he did, he got so into his fitness training at one point that he almost said that it started to have a negative effect on his racing because he was afraid to take days off and was training too much in the season. I mean, you've already mentioned that you perhaps train harder in the off season, and the season is about recovering after races. Is there anything else that you've learned through the benefit of experience over the years that you were doing differently now to what you were doing when you were younger?
I would say the main thing is sleep. That's something I've focused more on recently, and that's one thing as an athlete we're not very good at, and it's unfortunate because in an ideal world it would be the guy that works the hardest reaps the rewards, but that's not the case. It's often the guy that does his work, puts his feet up on the couch and focuses on sleep that is going to benefit most, and that's something that's so tough in this day and age. It seemed to be laziness to rest and sleep, but I really don't listen to what people say anymore. I listen to my body, and if I feel tired, I sleep. I try and keep on top of that as much as anything now. For me, running is such a good gauge on a bicycle because terrain changes. It's always hard to gauge where you're at, but running, I always notice my pace will vary depending on sleep. If I want to improve my average pace per kilometre, I'll spend an extra hour in bed, and strangely enough, you run faster. So it's clear for me. I'd say rest is 50% of what I do during the racing season now. I try, and whenever I travel to flyway races like Australia, America, Argentina, I try and lie in my bed as much as possible now. In the past I might have flown through the night, arrived for example in Argentina at like 8 o'clock in the morning, got the rental car, got to the hotel, got some breakfast and went to the gym, and that was completely counterintuitive now when I look at it, because it was pointless what I was doing. There was no real benefit in it, and now I understand getting to your bed is key. Making sure that you're hydrated after a long haul flight, getting that night's rest and waking up feeling fresh, and then go to the gym.
So you get the recovery in first. So because we work with a lot of athletes where when travel is frequent, we advise them often to treat the long haul flight like a hard training session, in the way that you've got to respect that it's going to take a lot out of you. So it sounds like you've learnt that the hard way.
Yeah, definitely. When I was with Red Bull 10 years ago, I think I learnt more there than anywhere else, because it sounded strange at the time, because you thought, I'm just on a flight, I'm reading a book or doing whatever, and they taught me that for us as athletes, we travel so much that's half the battle, is making sure that you're fit enough to travel and not get ill, not get sick. On the bike, okay, it's physical, but a good base level of fitness and you're going to get by. But if you're not recovering and you're not making sure that you're well hydrated and you're not on top of your nutrition, then at the end of a race you're going to feel fatigued. And I say I learned that 10 years ago, but still I've been making mistakes up until a couple of years ago, because of the mentality of, you're always trying to push yourself, always trying to improve. But hopefully now I can kind of keep on top of it. But it's a hard thing as an athlete. You've got to make sure and rest and recover, and a lot of us don't do that.
Yeah, I think it's part of the mentality, isn't it? Hard work gets you a long way, but it needs to be balanced. And I know as an athlete I used to overtrain a lot, and I wish, looking back now, to a large extent I'd learnt those lessons earlier. But it's part of what we're, I guess, trying to do with some of the work we do with athletes now outside of hydration, is try and give them an appreciation of those other factors, because hydration affects recovery, but recovery is a much bigger deal, and like you said, sleep and all those other things factor in.
Yeah, definitely. And sometimes you wake up and you feel super fresh, and that's the benefits of jet lag. Sometimes you can wake up at 4:30 and think, I'm going to kill dead things today. And you'll feel great until midday, and then you'll just go off the edge of a cliff. And that's what you've got to remember. You've got to keep that in mind, because sometimes you can have a coffee and feel great again, and you completely forget how you felt a few hours before. So I always try and take a 24-hour period and remember how I felt at every stage, because sometimes you can be in bed at night and you don't feel tired, and you think, oh, that means I don't need sleep. But you got to remember that if you felt knackered earlier in the day, then there's a good chance that you are lacking in sleep. For me, as a motorcycle racer, I do know that at the end of races, sometimes I've had a week off training and go to a race event, and that's the best I've felt in the last few laps of the race, because I've got mental clarity. There's oxygen going to my brain, and I'm able to make decisions that I wouldn't have been able to in periods when I thought I was super fit, but I was really overtrained. Yeah. So it is really something that's so strange. You don't understand all of what's going on inside your body. I think unfortunately you don't often know until you get into a race scenario, and by then it's too late.
Yeah, when you're under pressure, that's when it shows. One thing I wanted to ask you about, and drilling down into way more specifics, is what is your nutrition sort of routine like in the immediate build up to a race? Do you have a set sort of sequence of things you like to eat, or how do you approach that?
I'm fortunate that I've got a stomach seemingly made of stone. Things don't seem to affect me. I know there's some riders that, Italians in particular, that will eat only pasta and white pasta. Yeah. They can't have any sauce because their stomach is so sensitive. For me, I'm gifted with a stomach that can cope with anything. So for me, it's all about fuel. I eat like from a Wednesday before a race weekend. I just eat everything in sight. Yeah. Make sure I keep myself fueled. It's more about hydration for me. Yeah. Food, I avoid bread. Is probably about the only thing that has a negative effect for me. But I just keep on top of hydration, weigh myself on the scales to make sure everything is on an even keel, and before and after sessions, make sure that I'm not. Sometimes you can be 2 kilos less and you don't even realise it. But then at other times you may even be a kilo more because you might have taken too much fluid on board. So it's all about getting the balance. Yeah.
How much do you see your body weight fluctuate over the course of a race week? Do you think?
For me, it can be 2 kilos. If we mentioned before about Thailand, we got a 35-minute race, and even though I'm taking on some fluids, it can be 2 kilos. Yeah. I'm a big sweater, so over the course of an hour I can lose 3 litres of sweat. Right. So that's something that in the past I honestly don't know how I cope with it, but the body's it's got a wonderful knack of adapting. Yeah. And I was able to pull through at those times, but I was obviously in deficit. My body was adapting and keeping me on par, but it had a knock-on effect, that's for sure.
So I guess it's what the hydration plan has done, I guess, is bridge the gap between just coping and actually being able to perform.
Yeah, definitely. That has been a big factor for me. In the past, I did a 5-day week once, my only ever 5-day working week, where I did a 40-hour week, where I had to test my Superbike 2 days, and then I had to test for MotoGP 3 days afterwards for the manufacturer that I was riding with. And due to hydration and the stresses that was going on, I know during a 3-day race weekend that as each day passes, I sleep less and less. Yeah. At that stage, with a 5-day week, by the end of the week, I wasn't sleeping at all. I was maybe getting a couple of hours sleep. Might have been awakened 30 to 40 times a night, and I try to keep on top of that now with my hydration, because like I mentioned, whenever I was getting physio in the past, I might be falling asleep, didn't understand if I needed more sleep or if I just needed to be hydrated, whereas now I think I'm much more balanced, and that's something that I owe a lot to precision hydration, because it's changed my life, not just for my career, but means that I can wake up in the morning and not feel fearful of being in deficit.
It's really good to hear that, because that was, people who know precision hydration know that I started it because it had a huge, learning about this had a huge impact on my own health and performance. And although some of us, you're up at 1900 milligrams a litre, I'm 1800 milligrams a litre, we're in the top few percent, we're sort of outliers, if you like. We're out there, and it's good that we've been able to have a positive impact with that. It's really nice to hear.
Yeah, and it's something a lot of people don't know. Cycling with some guys here in Monaco, and they may describe some of their symptoms to me, and more often than not, it seems to be that they're lacking in sodium. So many guys don't notice, and your training gear can be absolutely covered in salt.
Yeah.
And it's so obvious when you look at that, but people aren't educated in it, because we just know that you sweat, you drink water, everybody's the same. But thanks to precision hydration, I understand that we're not all the same. Sodium is the one that varies for all of us, and everybody's individual. And now that I'm aware of that, it means that I can enjoy riding my bicycle, enjoy riding my motorbike, and not have to worry about that.
I think one of the other things as well that we come across quite a lot is that people are quite fearful of salt and sodium, because the general health advice for people who don't sweat a lot is to minimise the consumption instead of increasing it. So sometimes the advice that we're giving seems to go against normal health advice. And whilst we would always say, there's a good reason for a lot of people probably to reduce sodium in their diet, it's the opposite for people who sweat out a lot. And that's exactly like you said, that's what people find confusing. It's like there's not one rule for everyone. You have to understand what works for you, and that's what I guess that's what our mission is, to try and sort of get people to understand that. So it's good to know you're helping spread the word down here.
Seems to be a lot of the car drivers are on the case with that. They really understand the hydration aspect. I think it was Daniel Ricciardo that mentioned precision hydration to me first. Years ago, because out on the bike I'd kind of described the problems that I was having at that stage, and those guys were really on the case with it. And one thing led to another, and I went and got tested with precision hydration, and that was a big turning point for me.
Yeah, so tell us about that, when you got tested, because I know that you were tested at Silverstone at the racetrack in the UK at Porsche Human Performance, and the guys there told me when they tested you that the score was really, really high. So you were losing a lot of salt in your sweat. Was that something that you expected when you had the test, or?
Yeah, at that stage, honestly, it was, because as athletes, you're always aware of your body. And for the couple of years before that, I knew something was going on, and Google is your friend. Some people that they can search Google and look for symptoms and go, yes, I've got that. But I think as athletes, you're always very objective, and you can understand what you're looking at. And that was the first thing that I saw with the sodium loss, that I realised that there's something going on here, because I moved to Monaco at the end of 2012. And that was when the problem really started to accelerate. And whenever I was training in the summer, it was getting really tough, where I was drinking water and I was taking some electrolytes, but obviously not to the level that I needed. And some mornings I would wake up and it was like the world's worst hangover.
Yeah.
And that's what I remember, because I guess I was so lacking in sodium, so I started to take extra electrolytes and started to get to the bottom of it. But then whenever I heard about precision hydration and the test that they were doing, that you guys were doing, then I realised, that's something that I need to get confirmed. So when I went for the test and got the results, it was just such a confirmation for me. It was something that I kind of knew, but it's not until you see it in black and white then I realised that this is something I need to be on top of, and it really confirmed a lot of things for me.
So it helped with your day-to-day training, it sounds like, in the heat. Is it something you use when you're racing abroad as well? Because I guess you go to some pretty hot places doing superbikes.
Yeah, it's something now that I always have a set of weighing scales with me to understand how many litres I'm losing. But in the past, I didn't understand that it wasn't just about the water. I would look at 2 kilos less being 2 litres, and I was trying to get water back inside my system. But now I realise it's all about the sodium content for me. If I'm losing 1900 milligrams of sodium per litre of sweat, then I understand how to balance things. And I just was completely out of whack in the past. I didn't know what was going on, and that affected my sleep. It also meant that if I was getting physio in the afternoon, I was maybe falling asleep, because I was just... my whole system was not in sync at all, so I never understood when I was tired from sleep deprivation or jet lag, or when I was tired just from my electrolytes being up the left. So it was something that really changed my life, and things have been a lot easier since then.
Yeah. When you travel with racing at the moment in superbikes, where's the toughest conditions environment wise that you go and race in for heat and humidity and stuff?
Oh, on our calendar it's Thailand. It's the toughest one because we get on average 35 degrees there. So our race isn't so long, it's about 35 minutes, but you lose an incredible amount of fluids during that time. We have a camelback system, but we can only get, it's supposed to be 500 mils, but I top mine up probably more like 700 mils every ounce I can get into me. I try to drink as much as I can. And a few years ago when I first went there, I would stand on the scales after a couple of days and I would be 2 kilos down because I couldn't actually get the fluid back in the system. Yeah. Whereas now, for example, this year when I went to Thailand, Friday to Sunday, things were consistent. I was able to sleep and I was able to keep myself well hydrated. So that was definitely a big turning point and made things a lot easier, because I remember a couple of years ago in Thailand racing with a couple of laps to go and you're almost delirious, whereas now I understand it's all about fluid, so I'm able to keep on top of it.
Yeah, because I guess it helps you because the concentration factor in what you do is super high, because I think a lot of people don't realise that actually the physical demands of the racing are really hard, and a lot of the action comes in the last few laps quite often, but you've got to have the mental clarity to focus and make decisions and all that kind of thing. So that's been a big factor for you, has it, in what it's done?
Yeah, exactly. As you said, it's all about, the reason we do training is for those last couple of laps, and that was something that was explained to me years ago, was if on a last lap fight you can be as aware as you are at the start of a race, then that's makes your training justified then, and you understand what goes on in a last lap fight. Some of the things that I've done in the last couple of years now, I understand that completely, compared to when I was a kid and just you had your tongue wrapped around the back of your neck, you were just clambering to get to the finish line. Whereas now, concentrate on my breathing and understand the last lap that, it's like the old golfing saying, buttons for dough, and that's the case for us. If you can have clarity in the last few laps, then that's going to be the difference between maybe throwing the gravel trap and winning a race.